Hi, this is Stacy with Limelight AZs. This is actually an update to the testimony that I did late last night. Um, I reviewed my testimony because I knew I was tired when I did it, and there's probably some errors in there. So I went ahead and reviewed it, made some notes, and I want to go ahead and include a couple things that I missed in the testimony, first of all. And there was two parts in particular that were not quite accurate date wise, and I want to go ahead and correct those. Also, if you see my lips, I was eating cherries this morning, and now it looks like I've had Botox injections in my lips because they're so pink. And I don't know, or that I've been crying, or that I look like the Joker or something. So, I had no idea. This is what happens when you're bedridden and you don't look in a mirror every morning. Anyhow, great breakfast with cherries, but anyhow, so yes, update with from my testimony last night. I'm going to go ahead and pause this probably several times to look at the notes, make sure I don't miss anything, because there were several things, and come back to you and tell you the next part. So here we go. One of the biggest foundational things for why I turned to paganism. As a kid, I had a pretty incredible sense of intuition and would actually have like visions and see things. And this was something that I thought was normal. And I had tried talking to adults about it and had tried talking to people at my church about it when I was a kid. And it was never really received very well. At one point, I was even told that unless it's 100%, it's not of God. Um, Today, at this point, I do somewhat agree with that. I was really angry over that, even after coming to faith. But I see the validity in that statement. However, I think that just like most things, there may be a training period. And I think God was trying to train me to listen to Him, to know His voice. And because of the rejection of me from people that were supposed to be spiritual leaders, I ended up being somewhat resentful. Again, I didn't hate Christians. I just, if if they could not validate a part of me that I had no control over and make it seem that I had some sort of control over whether or not Satan was affecting me, then it was a scary notion for a kid, and it just never settled right. And I didn't know any different other than church until I was in my early 20s and just after I got married. And by the way, that had nothing to do with my husband. Me going into paganism wasn't because he was involved in it or anything like that. It was just something that I happened into at that point in my life. But pagans were very, very accepting of the gifts that I had. And believe me, it took me a really long time to call them gifts. So that is what drew me to paganism. That is why I left the church. I never really had a foundational walk with the Messiah, but at that point, I just was your typical Sunday goer church, be involved in church. This is how life is, and didn't didn't get it. And so that was why it was so easy for me to turn away from church. So I hope that answers that question about how I even got involved in paganism. It was based from childhood. It was, and also now I also know that there was a family history of some involvement with the Masons and whatnot. So, but yeah, people not being able to support a child who is being and guide them and how to listen better to God, but tell them that what they're hearing isn't of God because it's wrong, I disagree with. They're children. We are supposed to be here to help guide them and help to hear God's voice. So to tell a child that what they're hearing is not of God is truly terrifying to them. And so, I mean, I went to a community that accepted my gifts until I could accept them. So, anyways, so there's that part. I had mentioned that I was pagan, but I didn't specify what pantheon. I wasn't really involved in a specific pantheon. I was what we would call eclectic. I kind of drew on different pantheons and different beliefs to morph it to what I believed. I had a closer relationship with an unnamed goddess than I did with the unnamed god. I didn't have, I mean, they all kind of seemed the same to me. So I didn't have any specific goddess that I found myself attracted to. I was dedicated into a pantheon, but I didn't end up doing the education portion after that dedication. So it really didn't really go anywhere, even though it was dedicated into that pantheon. So for the most part, I would say that I was an eclectic practitioner. I just, as I learned, and I drew on it and learned how to do spell work, learned how to listen to my intuition, learned about the different gods and goddesses. I mean, pretty much just a pagan version of what Christians do. So I went back and I looked, and I kind of skimmed what I had written for my testimony. It's been a number of years since I've written it. I wrote it, I believe it was February, after I became a believer, so a couple months after. And something has happened over the last 7-ish years. Parts of my testimony have kind of faded into the background, where the more important parts have stayed at the forefront. And so I'm really glad that I wrote it down. I was angry at that time when I wrote I was still in my angry stage when I wrote my testimony. And I'll see if I can include a link in the description. So anybody who's interested can actually go and read what I wrote. Keep in mind, I was angry. I was not a happy convert. And that's pretty evident in my testimony, but it also gives a lot more details than what I gave in what I said last night, and actually things that I had forgotten about, like the conversation with my mom, which I'll get to in a little bit. But one of the things I wanted to mention is that I was wrong about the date. It was not September 23rd, it was September 29th, and I know that because seeing the angel happened just 2 days. It was on a Wednesday, and it happened just 2 days prior to the function that I needed to go to. That was the first Friday of of October. So the interesting thing that I've also found out in years since, and since coming to Torah observance, is it just happened to be the very last day of Sukkot, and happened to be the very last moments of Sukkot when I saw that angel. Did not know that for many years. It also happens to be, which is kind of an interesting thing, and I don't know how it relates, or if it even relates, but within the Catholic belief system, which I'm not Catholic, but and never have been, and don't have family that is, but that within the Catholic belief system, that the 29th of September is also the Feast of Archangels. And so it was just interesting that I happened to see an angel that particular day. I do think it relates more to Sukkot than it does to anything else. But I thought it was interesting because Sukkot would have ended at sunset that day, and it was at sunset that I saw the angel. So very, very interesting. It'll be interesting to have a conversation with God at some point about that. Okay, so tapping in. So when I saw the angel, I did what I called in the video tapping in. I've always called it that. I got the terminology from a movie, because gosh, I don't even remember the name of the movie. I can see the scenes in my head, but and they had called it tappings. So it just sort of clicked, and I've always called it that. That is when you connect intentionally to the spirit world. Well, after coming to faith, I refused to do that. I figured if God is going to use my intuition, he needs to refine it in the way that he sees fit instead of me chasing after it. And so for, oh gosh, probably 4 years after coming to faith, I had like zero intuition. I probably could have tapped in and gotten more information when I felt like I needed it. But I couldn't do that because that was the way that I did it as a pagan. And I wanted it to be that if God wanted me to receive information, that I would receive information, not because I was chasing after it. So, and I still don't do what is tapping in really. I might pause for a second and wonder if God is going to give me any information, but I don't purposely try to break into the spiritual realm to try to glean information. And yes, that is very, very true that you can. I don't recommend it because, gosh, if you remember, I said I had 1.5 years worth of spiritual warfare. I really didn't want to open any doors back up to that. So I have since had God giving me my intuition back and showing me things. And I mean, so far in recent history, I can tell you that my oldest, who's pregnant with the second baby, I knew she was pregnant before she announced it to anybody. And that was after her being somewhat concerned that she wouldn't be able to get pregnant. And I knew that it was a girl. That we'll still find out. She hasn't had any ultrasounds, and so there's no telling if she's going to be having a girl for sure until she has that baby. But at the time when I was told that she was pregnant, and I was like told, I was just laying down to bed, and it just laid on me. Allie's pregnant with a girl, and I was like, okay, but I didn't say anything to her because I didn't want to get her hopes up. I was a little unnerved by the randomness of it. And then the next day I found out that she was thinking that she might be pregnant. And I said, oh, this is a girl. This is a girl. I know it's a girl. So we have been saying it through her whole pregnancy now that this is a girl. So if it's a girl, it's a girl. If it's not, I don't have an answer for you. But I'm sure it's a girl. Anyways, and then also another occasion was when I was pregnant with Nissa. I am very pro-birth and pro-natural birth and unmedicated and unaffected by medical this or medical that and letting the body do what it needs to do during birth. And I was adamant against having a C-section that appeared to me at the time to be a normal standard. You should have a C-section because our country has a 33% C-section rate. And was given a document to sign that said I was refusing C-section. And just hit me. If I sign this, the baby's dead. There was no real logical reason. There were some indications that there was something going on, but nothing major. And I couldn't sign it. And then we found out after they sent the placenta for pathology that there was a few things going on with it, including an infection that is known to cause the placenta to detach prior to birth. So I am thankful that God has given me the gifts that I have of listening to him. And each year that passes, that gets a little bit stronger. So, but no, I don't do the tapping in really anymore. I just pause and listen to see if God has got something for me. If he doesn't, he doesn't. If he does, great. So sometimes it comes to me without me ever asking or without me ever even pausing. It just gets laid on me and I just know. So, and that's what happened with the C-section, and that's what happened with Allie. So But those are just a couple of examples of kind of how my intuition works. So one of the incorrect things that I had in my testimony was I said when I was traveling through public transportation for work that it was 2011. It wasn't. It was 2012. 2011 was too early. By then, I was still dealing with spiritual warfare and whatnot. And 2012, when I was traveling for work, the spiritual warfare was over. So, just tired brain, and it's been a long time. So, in the testimony video, sorry, apparently I still can't talk this morning. But in the testimony video, I mentioned that I had been given the number 6. I didn't know if it was 6 days, 6 months, 6 years. Well, there was something significant that happened at the 6-month mark. Don't think it's really a good idea to give that information right now. I have a very strong pause in my spirit about giving that story. It's a pretty intense story, and it's not going to change anything with my testimony. So I think I will avoid that. Just that something had happened in February of 2013, which was 6 months after I had received that message. But it did get me thinking last night when I was doing my testimony that the 6-year mark, I thought it was this year because I was saying 2011, but it's actually next year. August of 2018 will be 6 years since I had that impression of something big. So we'll see if something big happens in August of next year. I'm hoping that by then it's my health that is so much better. And that's what I was thinking last night. Of course, I was thinking it was August this year, which is next month. But now it's like a whole another year away. And I'm just like, well, I guess it's not that big of a revelation. Or it possibly could be just something really big on a global level. That's what happened with the 6-month mark. So, I don't know. Sorry. So probably August, September, I would say I would give, it was August that I had the impression. So I would say somewhere between July, August, September of 2018, something significant will happen. Maybe. We'll see. I don't know. I'm questioning it enough that I don't know. Because maybe it was just the thing for February that I knew was going to happen. But, all right. Random conversation is done for that part. One of the things I forgot to mention with our move to Wisconsin was not only did we send my husband with like no money and we went and lived there for 4.5 years. It was September that we moved. So almost 5 years. That when we moved, we were not just going with nothing. Like, we were seriously dependent on only God. We didn't know a soul in Wisconsin. We knew nothing about Wisconsin. The closest person to where we were moving, which was on the east side, right along Lake Michigan of Wisconsin, was my brother in Minneapolis, which was 6.5 hours from there. He was the closest person that we knew. And that was just kind of a crazy time in our lives. We also moved at a really bad time of year. September is not long before winter when you have no money. And you have no clue what you're dealing with for winter. We had we're coming from a sunny region, so we don't have boots, we don't have jackets, we don't have blankets, we don't have none of that stuff. My brother and his family did bless us with some blankets and stuff, which we were very thankful for. And obviously we made it through. I don't really remember how we acquired boots or whatnot, but yeah, it was kind of a crazy time of our lives. But at the time, it really didn't seem like it. It just seemed like we're doing what God is saying to do, so let's do it. My husband was the one that was most stressed about it. I remember the night before we bought the plane ticket for him, the night, literally 12 hours prior to departure. And I remember him sitting there and he's going like this, like looking at the screen, like, am I really going to purchase this plane ticket with the last little bit of money that we have to go to someplace I don't know with no money? And, because he's a very planned out type person. I'm the fly by the seat of her pants person. And I look at him and I'm like, what are you doing? He goes, this is just stressful. I'm like, just buy the ticket. Let's just go. Just go. God is saying do this. Let's do it. I don't understand. Had very little respect for understanding what he was going through at the time. So, but he did it. He did it. I'm so proud of him, and I'm so glad that he did, because it was a huge blessing to our lives and our family for many years, and taught us a lot by being away from an environment that we were used to. So, yeah, that was a pretty entertaining time of our lives. One of the things that I typically include in my testimony I did not do last night. I was so tired. I thought about this morning just redoing it, but I don't see a reason to do that. I really felt the prodding to do it, so apparently it just wasn't pertinent to the testimony last night, for whoever needs to see it. But I do want to include is an interesting thing that happened. So, like I said, I'm going to cough for a second. So, like I said, got saved December 31st, 2010. And then went for a year and a half worth of spiritual warfare. Well, approximately a year after getting saved, I believe it was in January of, that would have been 2012. So before the event when I was traveling for work. But anyways, January, I had started at a mega church, and they had this series that they were doing. It sounded just really interesting to me. It was about ministry and talking to people of other faiths, which I was thinking for pagans that I wanted to do. Well, once I got involved in it, it looked like it turned out it was specifically geared toward Muslims. But I still learned a lot of information in it, and I thought it was interesting. There was quite a few people in the group. It was no small group that did this class. There was probably close to 80 to 100 of us. And we had these big, these big round tables that we sat at that were more like what you would have seen on like a cruise ship or something. And so we just found seats at the beginning of the series. And the series, I think, was 10 weeks. And I ended up having this seat with this one other couple. My husband was truck driving at the time, so was not able to attend with me. Plus, it wasn't really his thing. I was the one that was interested in learning this information. And so it was just myself and this couple that were... Sorry, I had a small interruption. So, was at this function, at this table, had this couple sitting next to me, and at some point through the series, I think it was probably like at least 4 weeks in, the people doing the class ask if it's ever, and I'm going to pause for a second after I ask this question, and I think you should think about this question, and maybe even pause my video to really kind of contemplate what your answer would be. But to wondered if it was ever okay for a person coming from a different religion, let's say, because I don't know enough about the Muslim religion to know what their holidays are or whatnot, but let's just say a Hindu religion. And if a person comes from a Hindu religion and converts to Christianity, is it ever okay for that person to participate in the holidays that they grew up with? Any of the religious holidays. So in this case, a Hindu feast or a Hindu ceremony or celebration. Is it okay for the person coming from Hinduism, who's now born again in Christ to celebrate these holidays. And everybody contemplated on it, and I want you to, whoever is watching this, to take a minute to think about that, and pause it. So here, I'm going to pause it for you. Did you have time to pause it? I hope so. Okay. So, is it okay if somebody who was raised in one religion to continue celebrating feasts and whatnot that are for their former religion? The overwhelming answer from the group was no, it's not okay. And I have never had a moment prior to this particular moment, nor have I had a moment since that was quite like it. I firmly believe to this day, and here it is 6 years later, that this was a God opening the mouth of the ass situation. I would need, you know what, I'm going to find, I can't find the scripture for that right now, because if I switch it out of my my camera, then I cannot come back in and have it all in one piece. So I will just post the scripture down below where the talking donkey, and where God used a donkey to talk. So for me, I was the donkey, and he used my mouth to talk. And it was the straw on the back for whether or not we celebrated Christmas and Easter. The couple that I was sitting next to was like, "Oh no, absolutely not. It's not okay, because it's still celebrating gods of other gods." I am a laid back person. It takes a lot to get me upset. I went from 0 to 100 in my anger, and I firmly believe it was the righteous anger of God, and it came through me because I was aware of the catch-22 with this. And I just looked at them, and I go, what? I was like, why is it not okay for them to have their pagan celebrations? And assuming, again, this was January, so it was just after Christmas, assuming that you celebrate Christmas, which is also a pagan holiday. And it just bloop, 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 just poured right out of my mouth. And I said it with such fury that they actually sat back in their chairs. It was the look of shock on their faces. And right after that, I was like, oh my gosh, what just happened? But that was the nail in the coffin for me. Our family could not celebrate the Christian holidays the way that we had been celebrating them, or that we'd been taught to celebrate them. At that point, I was unaware of the feast days, and so we spent the next year to 2 years trying to. No, it was probably about a year and a half. We started with Easter, we got rid of the eggs and trying to make it new, but it felt again like a round peg in a square hole, or the other way around. It just didn't fit right, and it didn't feel right, and we just tried to get rid of the pagan symbolism revolved around the holidays and keep the date and try to have the family life. Well, it didn't take long for us to completely reject it, and then we went to Wisconsin, and we learned about Torah observance. So, that was a pretty interesting point in my life, and I firmly believe that God spoke through my mouth. The way it came out, I didn't even realize what I had said until it was over. And I ended up going to the same couple the next week because I had obviously made them quite unnerved with what I said. And I said, I'm really sorry about last week and with the amount of force that I said it with, because it was not just saying it. It was the way it was said. And they're like, you know what? No, that's okay. It gave us a lot to think about and a lot to talk about. And we're discussing it now. And I have no idea what has happened to that couple since. I know that they were planning on heading to Haiti. I don't know if they celebrate Christmas and Easter anymore, if they have found Torah observance or what. So just interesting how God uses us. So that's the end of my little video on updating for the testimony video, which it is now 30 minutes long, so it's almost as long as the actual testimony video. But hopefully it kind of fills in some of the holes and corrects some of the stuff that I messed up on with dates for the actual date that I saw the angel, as well as the year when I was on public transportation. As far as learning more about prayer, which Stephanie posted on the testimony video, I intend to get that video done today. I don't know. It is Shabbat tonight, so it may not happen. But I do intend on getting that video done today to kind of explain a little bit about where our prayer, or where at least where my prayer life is, and how it's been affecting our family, which is a positive thing. So anyways, if you have not subscribed yet, please do so below and leave your comments. I would love to hear from you. So talk to you later.